Our top focus this Tuesday morning, day 2 of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's whirlwind Tokyo tour, and all eyes are on the crucial, the headliner Quad Summit. Modi will be part of this year's second in-person Quad Summit, followed by one-on-one meetings with U.S. President Joe Biden, Japan Prime Minister Kishida and the newly elected Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. The Quad was formed to counter China's influence in the Indo-Pacific summit. China has been fuming against the Quad Summit, called it a failed agenda as well. On the Quad's agenda today will be a range of varied topics, from post-COVID recovery, the Ukraine war and climate change. But the main message is to serve a warning to China and its aggression tactics. U.S. President Joe Biden has already hardened his stance, saying that the U.S. is ready to arm Taiwan in its defense against China's aggression. All eyes will also be on Prime Minister Modi and President Biden's one-on-one bilateral, a step further to strengthen mutual ties. On your screens are the live images coming in from the Quad Summit, which is just kicking off. The first handshake there between Prime Minister Modi and U.S. President Joe Biden. This sets the stage essentially for the bilaterals that happen later in the day. But there's that photo op of all the four world leaders. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, to his right is the Japanese Prime Minister Kishida. You have U.S. President Joe Biden and then the newly elected Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. This is a photo op that the world will be watching out for because of the power that each of these countries hold and the significance of this kind of an alliance. In this particular summit, only the second such in-person summit to happen, we're going to be seeing a number of issues being taken up. This kind of a meeting is happening, of course, during the war in Ukraine and changing geopolitical global order. All of that is going to be raised. So after that brief photo op, you see the world leaders engaging in small talk, making their way through, and now officially they will have a closed-door meet where several issues will be discussed, but the most primary among them is going to be on how to firm up their alliance further. Paulomi is joining us live from Tokyo this morning with all the updates. Paulomi, good morning. We just saw the photo op. All the big world leaders, the Quad Summit leaders coming together there, shaking hands briefly, posing for the media. But of course, there's going to be endless talk about what are the takeaways, what is the big outcome of that meeting.
Absolutely. Good morning to you, Akshata. We're, of course, live from Tokyo right now. The Quad Summit has just started. You saw that official family photo of the Quad leaders, which, of course, just happened a few minutes ago. And now the Quad Summit officially begins. 2 hours have been allotted for the summit as it takes place. And the four leaders will, of course, be engaging in some very serious conversation as to how to take this grouping and its initiatives forward. Remember, the Quad has been in existence for a very, very long time, but it's only in the recent times that you've seen, hectic and fast-paced developments in terms of the Quad achieving the objectives that it set out to achieve. It is, of course, the Quad has been about free and open Indo-Pacific and a secure and stable relationship between these nations in the Indo-Pacific region. Yesterday itself, we saw the launch of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which, of course, was again a challenge. It was a US-led initiative, a challenge and a counter to China's growing economic presence in the Indo-Pacific, especially after the US and former President of the United States, Donald Trump, had pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And that in itself, which was, of course, something which was conceived in the Obama presidency. And then, of course, with the US pulling out, the US's presence had, in fact, dwindled in the Indo-Pacific region, which is why the US Congress was putting a lot of pressure on the US government. And then, of course, with the presidency of Joe Biden, it has been now noted that this framework has come into fruition. Of course, it is something which has only been launched. They will, of course, go into the details of it. But this is, of course, again, the Quad Summit is about taking that relationship of these nations in the Indo-Pacific region, making it more secure and taking those, taking that relationship forward in terms of initiatives, not just in sectors which were initially highlighted. They've also cooperated in terms of vaccine development, in terms of vaccine exchange, in terms of maritime security, cyber security. These are some of the issues that have come up. And today, of course, we're looking at a joint statement, which is possibly, again, going to highlight the crisis in Ukraine, because this was something which was discussed in the virtual conference of the Quad leaders in March 2022. So that is, of course, going to come up. We do believe, because it hasn't been stated in as many words, but matters of global and mutual interest, as they say, will come up, which is what the MEA has told us. And of course, China's growing presence and belligerence in the region, in the Indo-Pacific region, which has been a threat to nations like Japan and to India as well. And of course, the US wants to counter that presence as well. So yes, we are going to possibly see again, like we saw yesterday, after the launch of the IPEF, that China will not be very pleased with this summit and the sort of takeaways that emerge out of that summit, Akshita.
I like how you refer to it, Paulomi, as a family photo, because that's literally what this is. This is the Quad family coming together. And as we're getting to those live images, I also want to refer to that moment when for the first time all the four world leaders came together. Prime Minister Modi was seen also talking and laughing, cracking a joke with the U.S. President Joe Biden, essentially also breaking the ice with the newly elected Australian Prime Minister. His first international big visit as Prime Minister is the Quad Summit. So, of course, there's going to be a lot of focus, as Paulomi mentioned, on so many issues, particularly because so much has changed geopolitically speaking, that the timing of this Quad Summit is very, very crucial. And one of the biggest takeaways that's always talked about, Paulomi, when there is this kind of a Quad meeting, virtual or otherwise, is about the kind of messaging to China. That is the moment that I'm referring to there, where you see Prime Minister Modi cracking a joke or two with regards to the Australia Prime Minister, the newly elected Australia Prime Minister. U.S. President Joe Biden also a part of really breaking the ice there with Prime Minister Albanese. But go ahead with regards to the China messaging, Paulomi.
Oh, it's going to be extremely strong, Akshita. Yesterday itself, the kind of strong reaction that we saw coming from the Chinese Foreign Ministry, specifically from the Foreign Minister himself, Wang Yi, was in relation to the launch of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. Remember, like I said, this is just the launch of the framework, the nitty-gritties, the finer details of it, and how this agreement and this initiative, this is not a very traditional trade agreement. So the initiative which has been launched and how they're going to, in fact, benefit all the nations that have come on board. 13 nations have come on board, aside from the United States, which is leading this initiative. So there are 14 nations already on board as far as this initiative is concerned. How is it going to ensure that they get the sort of tax breaks, the tariff breaks, etc., that they're looking for as well in terms of economics and trade? How is that going to work out? Many nations, of course, are awaiting those details. But even before those details have, in fact, emerged, just the coming together of these 14 nations has rattled China. And in fact, Wang Yi's statement critically stated that this is confrontational in nature, that this undermines peace in the region. Clearly, this is an economic initiative, and already China is feeling the heat. So this is going to be extremely crucial as far as the Quad Summit is concerned as well, because we are expecting a very strong, in fact, reaction from China. China already has been saying that the Quad is only a grouping of nations which is trying to flex muscle power in the region and is trying to, undermine a place of other nations in the region and is trying to threaten other nations. But already we're seeing very strong statements come out. Interestingly, U.S. President Joe Biden, and it's not the first time, he's mentioned this before as well, but yesterday in his one-on-one meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Kishida, he in fact stated that the U.S. is willing to militarily support Taiwan as well. Now that, of course, did not go down very well with China. Of course, the White House had to issue a clarification that the White House still maintains the one China policy, but that statement, clear, very clear, a very strong message which went out to China. It remains to be seen what sort of a statement emerges out of the Quad today.
And, that particular messaging from the U.S. president has set the tone perhaps for the Quad Summit today as well. There are going to be, of course, clear messages with regards to China's aggression. Geeta Mohan, a Foreign Affairs editor, is also with us on this broadcast. Geeta, good morning. We're beaming out live images right now of the Quad Summit that's underway. Do you believe there's a possibility that in the joint statement, the Quad leaders could actually name China?
Well, we have seen in the past also that in the Quad documents, China has been named. Primarily, the Quad leaders and the Quad joint communique refers to aggression in the Indo-Pacific theater. And yes, the reference is to China. Resilient supply chains, post-COVID, the resilience that market resilience that Quad leaders will be talking about does refer to China. But in terms of naming and trying to shame China, I do not think there is going to be a very strong worded statement with regards to that, because there are considerations when it comes to India as well. But yes, China will figure in the statement. Like Paulomi was saying, Taiwan certainly, Akshita, is a very sensitive issue and area where US is trying to do a balancing act on her own. On the one hand, President Biden says that they will militarily intervene should China invade or enter Taiwanese territory. On the other hand, if you see yesterday, one of the most important initiatives by the United States of America when it comes to the Indo-Pacific, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework and Partnership for Prosperity, that framework certainly did not include Taiwan at the launch. So a very strong message there to Taiwan as well and to China that they continue to maintain and honor one China policy, but there are certain concerns and that US will come to Taiwan's rescue. How? Again, we do not really know. We've seen many theaters where the US is involved, but in terms of military intervention, it seems like politically it is no longer a viable option for most countries. So again, countries of the region will also have to think things through. And that's why everybody's keenly watching reaction coming in from China. There is another important initiative that we will be looking into today during the Quad Summit. Within the Quad framework, Akshita, there is going to be the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness. That's IPMDA. Now, that's a framework that the Quad leaders will be discussing, the maritime domain awareness in the Indo-Pacific and like-minded countries coming together. The difference between Quad and AUKUS, Akshita, is the fact that Quad is not a military alliance. AUKUS certainly is a military alliance. So whatever they do in the maritime sphere, we will have to see what Beijing's reaction is going to be to that.
It'll be very, very interesting to know what kind of a statement really comes out from China, from Beijing. They've always been extremely wary of this kind of an alliance and have issued many statements in the past condemning this grouping of world leaders. I want to take this back across to Paulomi Saha, who's on the ground in Tokyo, getting us every single update. Paulomi, there's also a lot of curiosity, a lot of expectations from the one-on-ones, the bilaterals that happen later today as well.
Oh, absolutely. You know, right after the summit.
All right, let's cut across live. My apologies, Paulomi, for interrupting. Let's cut across live at the Quad Summit. Prime Minister speaking.
Vladimir Kishida, Vladimir Anthony Albanese और राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन। प्रधानमंत्री किशिदा, आपके शानदार आतिथ्य के लिए आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। आज टोक्यो में मित्रों के बीच होना मेरे लिए बहुत खुशी की बात है। मैं सबसे पहले प्रधानमंत्री एंथनी अल्बनीज़ी चुनावों में विजय के लिए आपको बहुत बहुत बधाई, बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं। शपथ लेने के 24 घंटे के बाद ही आपका हमारे बीच होना क्वाड मित्रता की ताकत और इसके प्रति आपकी प्रतिबद्धता को दिखाता है। एक्सेलेंसीज, इतने कम समय में क्वाड समूह ने विश्व पटल पर एक महत्वपूर्ण स्थान बना लिया है। आज क्वाड का स्कोप व्यापक हो गया है और स्वरूप प्रभावी हो गया है। हमारा आपसी विश्वास, हमारा डिटर्मिनेशन लोकतांत्रिक शक्तियों को नई ऊर्जा और उत्साह दे रहा है। क्वाड के स्तर पर हमारे आपसी सहयोग से एक फ्री, ओपन और इंक्लूसिव इंडो पैसिफिक क्षेत्र को प्रोत्साहन मिल रहा है, जो हम सभी का साझा उद्देश्य है। कोविड-19 की विपरीत परिस्थितियों के बावजूद हमने वैक्सीन डिलीवरी, क्लाइमेट एक्शन, सप्लाई चेन रेजिलियंस, डिजास्टर रिस्पांस और आर्थिक सहयोग जैसे कई क्षेत्रों में आपसी समन्वय बढ़ाया है। इससे इंडो पैसिफिक में शांति, समृद्धि और स्थिरता सुनिश्चित हो रही है। क्वाड इंडो पैसिफिक क्षेत्र के लिए एक कंस्ट्रक्टिव एजेंडा लेकर चल रहा है। इससे क्वाड की छवि एक फोर्स फॉर गुड के रूप में और भी सुदृढ़ होती जाएगी। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Statement there by Prime Minister Modi. Remember that these are essentially opening comments which every world leader will be making. So we will, of course, be getting you those live updates of what each world leader has to say. But Prime Minister Modi essentially talking about how this alliance and how India has played a major role during the fight against coronavirus during the peak of the pandemic. Besides that, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also, in fact, thanking Australian Prime Minister Albanese for turning up for this Quad Summit, for the in-person Quad Summit, barely 24 hours after taking oath as the Prime Minister of Australia. You see the seating also of the Quad Summit. Very interesting to note how every leader is facing, and essentially, you've got them around each other in a circle facing so that they can all talk about every issue. A very personal feel that's been given to this entire summit where the world leaders are talking. Let's cut across to the U.S President's opening comments.
You got on a plane, you were sworn in, got in a plane, and if you fall asleep while you're here, it's okay. Because I don't know how you're doing it, but it's really quite extraordinary. Just getting off the campaign trail as well. Congratulations on your election. As I told you when you won, I called you that we greatly appreciate your commitment of being here so soon after taking office. Quad leaders met for the first time just over 1 year ago. It seems longer, but to date our partnership is central to achieving our goals and critical for the foundation of our continuing cooperation, in my view. We already accomplished a great deal. As was referenced earlier, cooperating on COVID-19 response and health security, more to do, to state the obvious. Partnering on 5G and technology supply chains, technology standard setting, and launching our Quad Fellowship Program, which I think can make a difference, which we talked about earlier. At the same time, we're navigating a dark hour in our shared history. The Russian brutal and unprovoked war against Ukraine has triggered a humanitarian catastrophe, and innocent civilians have killed in the streets, and millions of refugees are internally displaced as well as exiled. And this is more than just a European issue. It's a global issue. The fact is that if you turn on the television and you'll see what Russia's doing now, it appears to me that Putin is just trying to extinguish a culture. He's not even aiming at military targets anymore. He's taking out every school, every church, every natural history museum, as if to try to obliterate the Ukrainian culture. And the world has to deal with it, and we are. The global food crisis is made worse by Russia's blocking Ukraine from exporting its millions of tons of grain. And also, as long as Russia continues the war, the United States will work with our partners to help lead a global response, because it can affect all parts of the world. At the same time, the United States must and will be a strong, steady, and enduring partner in the Indo-Pacific. We are in the Indo-Pacific. We are an Indo-Pacific power. I was once asked by, well, I won't go into it, but I was once asked by the leader of China why I kept talking about being an Indo-Pacific power. I said, because we are. We share the Pacific, one entire side of our country, and we have been deeply involved with all of you for a long time. As long as Russia continues this war, we're going to continue to be partners and lead a global response. And we're Indo-Pacific power, as I said. We're going to stand with you, our close democratic partners, and we're going to stand for the shared values and the shared vision we all have. Shortly before Russia launched its invasion, my administration published our Indo-Pacific strategy to advance a free, open, connected, secure, and resilient Indo-Pacific. Russia's assault on Ukraine only heightens the importance of those goals, the fundamental principles of international order, territorial integrity and sovereignty, international law, human rights must always be defended, regardless of where they're violated in the world. So the Quad has a lot of work ahead of us. It's the fact of the matter is that we have a lot of work to do, keeping this region peaceful and stable, tackling this pandemic and the next one, and addressing the climate crisis as referenced by our new colleague, ensuring that technologies of the future are governed according to our values, But in a short time, we've shown the Quad isn't just a passing fad. We mean business. We're here to get things done for the region, and I'm proud of what we're building together, and I look forward to our vital partnership flourishing and for many years to come. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister.
Detailed statement there by U.S. President Joe Biden, essentially giving out a sense of what the United States hopes will be the takeaways from this Quad summit. He's made a mention of the Ukraine war, hasn't shied away from taking on Russia, from tackling Russia, but has also highlighted how the Quad has achieved a lot more than thought possible in a very, very short span of time. The U.S. President also referring to the fact that the Indo-Pacific and all the countries lining up the Pacific, it's very important for a partnership with these countries for the United States as well. In line essentially with the Prime Minister's message, who highlighted how the Quad has gained world prominence. Let's take this back across to Paulomi Saha. She's reporting live with all the updates for us from Tokyo. So Paulomi, we just heard the opening remarks by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden. Gives us a glimpse, a sense essentially of what are the issues that every world leader there, that every country seeks to reach some sort of consensus on.
Oh, absolutely. You know, those opening remarks which have been made by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and of course, that very strong statement which is coming in from the US President Joe Biden, in fact, sets the stage for the Quad summit. It is a very, very strong message. Of course, the US highlighting the Russia-Ukraine war, and of course, President Biden had some very strong words for the Russian aggression against Ukraine, how Russia doesn't want to simply militarily attack Ukraine and destroy Ukraine. The agenda is to somehow obliterate culturally Ukraine as it stands today. Some very strong words. He, of course, says that the Quad grouping is extremely significant in times such as these. And it is now that the grouping, of course, needs to come into its own as well. It has achieved a lot, but there is a long way to go, and it has that potential. Prime Minister Modi, of course, in his opening remarks saying that, you know, the Quad has a very constructive agenda for the Indo-Pacific, which, of course, focuses on a free, inclusive, open Indo-Pacific. Again, a very strong message for China as well, and saying that indeed that if the Quad continues to achieve its goals and initiatives in the manner that it has been achieving, then clearly it can in fact emerge as a force for good. So those are some of the key takeaways that have been in fact enunciated by both these leaders who've just spoken ahead of the summit commencing, and of course their long discussion that takes place over that. Of course, both of them congratulating the newly elected Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, who's of course in Tokyo, as President Biden in an off-the-cuff remark said within 24 hours of a swearing-in ceremony. So he, of course, jokingly said that if you fall asleep here, no one's going to mind, because obviously he's had a heated campaign against the ousted Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Right after the campaign, after election day, the results came out. He's just been sworn in, and he's landed in Tokyo for the Quad summit. Just goes to show, Akshata, how important this grouping is, and how important and significant the achievements have been so far in terms of vaccine delivery, in terms of supply chain resilience, which has been focused upon as well. Climate change, of course, is going to be one of the bigger issues as well, which has been, of course, highlighted by President Biden as well. And, of course, issues like Geeta was earlier pointing out about maritime security, and initiative in that regard as well. Cybersecurity, these are some of the issues, because security and stability in the region is also one of the main goals of this grouping. Akshita.
You know what this also highlights for me, Pauline, when I heard, the U.S. President's opening remarks, it's very clear that for America, the Ukraine war is still one of the big talking points, one of the big focus points. And the fact that India's foreign policy, and we've stressed on this time and again also in the last few months, but it's going to be focused on again here. The fact that India's foreign policy is slightly different from what the other world leaders have to say. We condemn war. We're against any sort of human rights violation, but at the same time, we're kind of on a balancing ground, trying to ensure that, we have equal footing as far as Russian ties also are concerned. And despite that, you have this kind of a summit taking place. Despite that, you have all countries taking India on board and saying that, look, we must talk about the Ukraine war, condemn all of the violence, condemn the human rights violation. That by itself, again, will highlight how India's foreign policy has shown in the last few months.
Well, absolutely. Akshita, India has maintained an independent foreign policy. It has come under no kind of pressure or dominance, and that has been respected by world leaders. The United States, obviously, they wouldn't want us, buying oil and gas from Russia, but it has been highlighted by the External Affairs Minister, S. Jaishankar, when he visited the United States last year. And of course, even on fora here in India as well, he's categorically stated that the percentage of oil and gas that India in fact purchases from Russia, it doesn't even match what Europe purchases in a day. So clearly, the sort of pressure on Russia, on India, so to say, is completely imbalanced and is completely something which needs review. And that is something which has gone out as a very strong message that India has maintained a balanced position. India does realize that it has relations with both countries, and it has been stating categorically across fora and in the United Nations as well that India believes that there has to be an immediate cessation of violence and hostilities, and there is no way forward if violence and hostilities continue and aggression continues, and that is not the answer or the resolution to any sort of a conflict or difference of opinion. We do believe that both nations need to come to the dialogue and discussion table, and that is only the way forward as far as we are concerned. We've of course been providing help and aid to Ukraine as well. We've been speaking to, of course, both sides as well. The Indian Prime Minister is possibly one of those few world leaders who's spoken both to President Vladimir Putin and also to President Zelensky. So clearly, this is India's position has been cemented in the larger scheme of things as to how India does maintain a balanced position, respected by the United States, by the United Kingdom, various other nations from the European continent as well. So this has been India's position, and it has been known as well. Of course, Ukraine is going to come up for discussion at the Quad Summit. US has made its intentions very clear. US has made its sentiments very clear in that opening remark, which was made by the President of the United States. But we will, of course, continue to highlight, and our position is going to be the same, that we will continue to put pressure in our own capacity as and when required to put pressure on both the sides to come to the dialogue table and resolve this conflict, which has been ongoing for a very, very long time, something that started on the 24th of February when Russia invaded Ukraine and has been going on ever since.
One issue that will be brought up in the Quad Summit that affects you and me, that affects every single one of us, is one of the outcomes of the Ukraine war, which is inflation, food prices going up. And that too is going to be brought up. I'd like to take that question across to Geeta Mohan, our Foreign Affairs Editor. Geeta, the issue of food security, that's something that affects every single one of us. And India, no doubt, is going to be raising that, the consequences of the Ukraine war on every single country.
Well, absolutely. So there are going to be aspects when it comes to economic and resilience of how to ensure that world economies are insulated. Having said so, Akshita, the fact of the matter is that no matter how you look at it, no matter how one looks at it, the Russia-Ukraine war is having an impact. There's a global surge of prices in wheat, in many food items. Russia and Ukraine amount for 1/3 of the global wheat exports, Russia being at the top, Ukraine being the 5th largest exporter. So both countries affected, and wheat not going out is certainly going to impact and affect global food crisis, and that certainly is going to be a part of the conversations. Remember, every conversation that world leaders are having today with regards to Russia and Ukraine, they are mentioning one thing and one thing alone, that is food security, that the impact of the war is going to be bigger and will have a larger, longer impact than we are seeing in the immediate front, which is food security. So that certainly is going to come up. Quad is not a formal structure. It's an ad hoc grouping. It does not have a secretariat. It does not have a letterhead. So they are only like-minded countries discuss things that matter, that are of concern to all countries. And in that, senior White House officials have said that there are differences of opinion on many counts, on many areas, and how to deal with things. Like, for example, how one deals with China. Australia might want a more stronger reaction. Japan is a little more careful because they're very close to China. And India is certainly very careful because we share a land boundary right now, and we are having trouble at the border. United States of America and Australia might want a more aggressive posturing. That's not going to happen. On Russia, Ukraine, the other leaders have a very different view from that of India. And senior White House officials again say that they understand where India comes from. India is looking at her own history and interests. So there are going to be differences of opinion, but largely they will try to build consensus on how to tackle not just the differences, but the concerns of the global community with regards to security, maritime structure, and a free and inclusive Indo-Pacific. And like you said, Akshita, most importantly, food security.
So that's going to be one big issue that's brought up. But if we're discussing particularly in the issue of trade, Geeta, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, that being rolled out yesterday was also one of the biggest highlights perhaps of this Tokyo visit and this, entire Quad summit. And that's a question I'd like to take across to Poulomi Saha, who's been tracking every update that comes in from Tokyo. What is the messaging, Poulomi, of, let's say, an Indo-Pacific Economic Framework really coming together? Largely, it looks like it was an initiative by the United States to send out a message to China.
Well, of course, yes, that is the broader message for anyone trying to read into the launch of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. That is the message. The U.S. was under a lot of pressure for, giving China the kind of free hand that it had in its growing, emerging presence in economic presence in the Indo-Pacific region, and that the U.S. did not have any stakes in the region. Obviously, the U.S. felt very threatened by that growing presence, and that is why, and especially after the United States, as we were talking earlier, pulled out of the Trans-Pacific partnership as well under Donald Trump's presidency. So clearly, there was a lot of pressure in order to ensure that the U.S. has its has its stake in the game as well. And that is when the U.S. has, of course, come forward in order to launch this Indo-Pacific Economic Framework that India is on board with. Prime Minister Modi was, of course, present over there as well. Like I was saying earlier, Akshita, the finer details of what this initiative, this trade initiative, is going to look like are still being worked out at the moment. They're, of course, exploring the possibilities that can emerge under this framework. But yes, it's a very strong message which has been sent out to China with these 14 nations coming together to launch this initiative yesterday. China, of course, reacted very strongly to the same as well. So clearly, it appears that China's growing belligerence is being countered by the United States and United States-led, other nations as well that do feel that China poses a threat to them, be it in security terms, be it in economic terms. They're all, in some sense, sending out a very strong message. And it's clear that the message is going across because the rattled response that you heard from the Chinese Foreign Ministry yesterday, specifically from the Foreign Minister himself, clearly stated that China is watching the developments that are happening in Tokyo extremely keenly and is obviously, trying to measure how that actually pans out in its own interests or not. So clearly, the Quad summit, you can expect that China will, of course, send out a very strong message, like Geeta was pointing out. Now, the Quad doesn't have a very formal structure. It is not a grouping that exists on paper. So it is an informal structure of like-minded nations that have come together in the Indo-Pacific region. So China is going to attack that and say that, these are just nations trying to flex muscle power. Right. And, there is no real agenda per se. They're just trying to, in some sense, bully others in the region. But it remains to be seen what that joint statement in fact holds in terms of key takeaways and how, of course, China reacts to the same as well, because, like I said, China will react.
China is worried. There's no doubt about it, especially with Quad now expanding. There's a lot of talk that in this summit, there's also going to be a discussion about South Korea being included in some working groups of Quad. Those images there is from the moment when all the world leaders came together. Prime Minister Modi seen chatting with U.S. President Joe Biden and Australia Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Both leaders, in fact, in their opening remarks, have made a comment about how the Australian Prime Minister has touched down in Tokyo barely 24 hours after being sworn in. And that handshake between Prime Minister Modi and U.S. President Joe Biden, something that we will see greater focus on in the coming hours when they sit down, to have a chat one-on-one. That bilateral is going to be also focused on. As we slip into a short break, I request Paulami and Geeta to be with us. I'm just going to play out the Prime Minister's opening remarks there at the Quad Summit, the meeting that's currently underway.
Your Excellencies, Vladimir Kishida, Vladimir Anthony Albanese और राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन। प्रधानमंत्री किशिदा, आपके शानदार आतिथ्य के लिए आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। आज टोक्यो में मित्रों के बीच होना मेरे लिए बहुत खुशी की बात है। मैं सबसे पहले प्रधानमंत्री एंथनी अल्बनीज़ चुनावों में विजय के लिए आपको बहुत बहुत बधाई, बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं। शपथ लेने के 24 घंटे के बाद ही आपका हमारे बीच होना क्वाड मित्रता की ताकत और इसके प्रति आपकी प्रतिबद्धता को दिखाता है। एक्सेलेंसीज, इतने कम समय में क्वाड समूह ने विश्व पटल पर एक महत्वपूर्ण स्थान बना लिया है। आज क्वाड का स्कोप व्यापक हो गया है और स्वरूप प्रभावी हो गया है। हमारा आपसी विश्वास, हमारा डिटर्मिनेशन लोकतांत्रिक शक्तियों को नई ऊर्जा और उत्साह दे रहा है। क्वाड के स्तर पर हमारे आपसी सहयोग से एक फ्री, ओपन और इंक्लूसिव इंडो पैसिफिक क्षेत्र को प्रोत्साहन मिल रहा है, जो हम सभी का साझा उद्देश्य है। कोविड-19 की विपरीत परिस्थितियों के बावजूद हमने वैक्सीन डिलीवरी, क्लाइमेट एक्शन, सप्लाई चेन रेजिलियंस, डिजास्टर रिस्पांस और आर्थिक सहयोग जैसे कई क्षेत्रों में आपसी समन्वय बढ़ाया है। इससे इंडो पैसिफिक में शांति, समृद्धि और स्थिरता सुनिश्चित हो रही है। क्वाड इंडो पैसिफिक क्षेत्र के लिए एक कंस्ट्रक्टिव एजेंडा लेकर चल रहा है। इससे क्वाड की छवि एक फोर्स फॉर गुड के रूप में और भी सुदृढ़ होती जाएगी। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
So that's the Prime Minister's opening remarks, where he talks about how he's among friends, as you see in those images there. We're going to be getting you all the pictures that are going viral already of the bonhomie between these four world leaders, and lots more on the takeaways of the Quad Summit, what's on the agenda, etc. coming up in just a few moments from now. Stay with us here on India Today.